The stars looked cold and distant from Outpost 47. Lieutenant James Reed stood at the main viewport, his eyes fixed on the endless black. 6 months on this remote station had taught him that space was mostly empty, but sometimes that emptiness hid things. "Lieutenant, you should see this." James turned to see Dr. Maria Torres hunched over her sensor station. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes never left the screen as she waved him over. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" James asked, leaning over her shoulder. "This energy pattern." Maria pointed to a faint line on her screen. It appeared for 8 seconds, then vanished. "It doesn't match any known signature, human or alien." James frowned. "Equipment malfunction. I ran 3 diagnostics. The sensors are working perfectly." Maria pulled up another screen. "This is the 4th time this month we've detected something similar. Always in the same sector, always brief, always gone before we can get a lock." James straightened up. "Send a report to Fleet Command. Mark it priority 2. "Already done." Maria looked up at him. "They'll say it's nothing again." "Probably." James walked back to the viewport. "But one day, they'll be wrong." 3 days later, the response from Fleet Command arrived. James read it aloud to Maria in the small mess hall. "Following review of sensor data from Outpost 47, analysis indicates probable sensor echo caused by cosmic radiation. No further investigation warranted at this time." He set down the tablet. Signed, Admiral Walker. Maria stabbed her fork into the gray food cube on her plate. Walker wouldn't know a real anomaly if it bit him in the ass. "The Admiral has better things to do than chase ghosts," James said, though his tone lacked conviction. "These aren't ghosts." Maria pulled out her personal tablet and slid it across the table. "I mapped all the appearances. They're following a pattern, James." He studied the display. The anomalies formed a perfect arc through the sector, each appearing progressively closer to the New Haven colony. "You think whatever this is, it's heading toward New Haven?" James asked. "I don't know. But something big enough to leave these energy traces shouldn't be dismissed as cosmic radiation." James was about to respond when the station's alarm blared. "Alert. Anomaly detected in Sector 7G. Energy signature exceeds previous readings by factor of 10. They both rushed to the command center. The main screen showed a massive energy bloom where before there had been nothing but empty space. "Can you get visual?" James asked the station's eye. "Negative. No optical data available." "Switch to full spectrum analysis," Maria said, sliding into her seat. Her fingers flew across the controls. "I'm picking up mass readings now." "Lieutenant, whatever this is, it's huge." The readings on the screen showed an object nearly 2 kilometers long. James felt a chill run down his spine. Nothing that big could hide so effectively. "Recording everything," Maria said. "They can't ignore this." For 3 minutes, the sensors tracked the massive object. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the readings flatlined. "Where did it go?" James demanded. Maria shook her head. "It's just gone. Like it was never there. Nothing that big just disappears. Unless it was designed to," Maria said quietly. Admiral Walker's face filled the view screen, his expression stern. "Lieutenant Reed, these continued reports are becoming problematic." "Sir, with respect, the evidence is mounting," James replied. "Dr. Torres has compiled." "I've seen Dr. Torres's data," Walker interrupted. "Our analysts say it's inconclusive at best." Maria stepped forward. "Admiral, the mass readings alone suggest a vessel larger than anything in our fleet. The energy signature doesn't match any known propulsion system." "Doctor, what you're describing is impossible with current technology," Walker said dismissively. "That's exactly my point, sir," Maria replied. "Whatever we're detecting shouldn't exist, at least not by our standards." Walker sighed. "Let me be clear. There are no unregistered ships of that size in human space. Our treaties with the Arkelian Collective require disclosure of any military vessels above destroyer class. If what you're seeing were real, it would trigger an interstellar incident. Unless it's using technology we don't understand, James suggested. Enough. Walker's face hardened. I'm ordering you to drop this line of investigation and focus on your actual duties. The transmission ended abruptly. James turned to Maria. He's scared. What? Walker. He's scared of what we might find. That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the anomaly. A ship that vanished like a ghost. He walked to the observatory dome, surprised to find Maria already there. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. She shook her head. I've been thinking about phase shift technology. The research was abandoned 20 years ago because it was too dangerous. Phase shifting an entire ship would require impossible amounts of energy, James said, unless they found a way to harness dark energy. Maria looked at him. It would explain why we only get glimpses. The ship exists partially in another dimension. James was about to respond when all the lights in the station went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later. What just happened? Maria asked. The station A's voice came through the speakers. Proximity alert. Unknown energy field detected surrounding the station. They rushed back to the command center. The main screen showed nothing but stars, but every sensor was screaming warnings. It's here, Maria whispered. Right on top of us. For a moment, reality seemed to bend. Through the viewport, James saw a glimpse of something massive and dark, covered in lights that seemed to bend in impossible ways. Then it was gone. The communication system chimed. An automated distress signal played through the speakers. This is New Haven Colony. We are under attack by unknown forces. The sky is changing. People are disappearing. Something is taking them. Please send help. The ship, it shouldn't exist. But it's here. The message cut off in static. James turned to Maria, his face grim. Prep the shuttle. We're going to New Haven. Walker ordered us to stay put, she reminded him. And people are disappearing. James checked his sidearm. Sometimes orders are wrong. As they prepared to leave, James looked back at the sensor readings one last time. Whatever had visited their station was now at the colony. A ghost ship that, according to everything they knew, couldn't possibly exist. But it was real, and it was taking people. The hunt for answers had begun. Tom's eyes were wide with fear. It came from nowhere. A ship, bigger than anything I've ever seen. But it wasn't. Fully here, like it was fading in and out. James helped the man to his feet. Did you see who took the colonists? Tom nodded. We call them the Gray. Not because of their color, because they're like shadows, half there. They moved through walls. Nothing could stop them. They took Tom to the medical center to treat his dehydration. While Maria cared for him, James found a stasis pod that had been activated. You hid in this? He asked when he returned. Tom nodded. Standard procedure for biohazards. I hoped they couldn't detect me in stasis. I set it to wake me after 24 hours. Smart thinking, James said. Did you record anything? My body cam. Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. I was on patrol when it started. Maria connected the camera to a terminal. The footage showed Tom's patrol route through the colony. Then, a shadow fell over everything. Looking up, the camera caught a glimpse of something massive in the sky, a dark shape with strange angles that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Then came the Gray. The footage showed humanoid shapes moving through the colony. They weren't solid. Their edges blurred, and light passed through them. They moved with purpose, touching colonists who then disappeared. They were selecting, Tom said, taking everyone. But why? Maria asked. What do they want? Tom shook his head. I don't know. But before I hid, I saw some of them in the research center. They seemed interested in our quantum communications array. James and Maria exchanged looks. New Haven had been testing experimental communications technology that could potentially work across vast distances instantly. "We need to see that research center," James said. The colony's research center stood at the edge of the settlement. Inside, they found clear signs of interest from the intruders. Equipment had been examined, data cores removed. "They were after our research," Tom confirmed. Maria studied the remaining equipment. "This quantum technology, it's similar to theoretical phase shifting. The same principle that might explain how their ship can appear and disappear." James's communicator beeped. An urgent message from Outpost 47. 3 more colonies had gone silent in the past 6 hours. All had been working on similar technology. "They're collecting something," James said. "Knowledge, technology, people, all related to quantum physics." "But why take everyone?" Tom asked. "Most colonists knew nothing about the research." "Insurance," Maria suggested. "Or maybe they can't tell the difference. Or maybe—" She didn't finish her thought. She didn't need to. The implication was clear. Maybe they took everyone because they wanted everyone. As they prepared to leave, Maria installed a special sensor package around the colony, one tuned to detect the unique energy signature of the ghost ship. "Next time it appears, we'll know," she said. They boarded the shuttle with Tom, knowing they needed to warn Earth. As they left atmosphere, all systems suddenly failed. "What's happening?" Maria shouted over the alarms. Through the viewport, a shadow passed over them. Massive, shifting, impossible. For a brief moment, they saw it clearly, a warship of incredible size, with a design that hurt the eyes to look at directly. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. The shuttle systems came back online. On Maria's scanner, a new reading appeared, the ghost ship's energy signature, heading directly toward Earth. "It knows we're tracking it now," James said quietly, "and it's not happy about it." They set course for home, racing against a warship that shouldn't exist, but was very real and very dangerous. The military headquarters on Earth's moon was buzzing with activity when James, Maria, and Tom arrived. News of the vanished colonies had spread, creating a mix of fear and confusion among Earth's leadership. Admiral Walker met them in a secure conference room deep within the lunar base. His face showed no apology for dismissing their earlier warnings. 4 colonies gone, over 12,000 people missing, he said, pacing the room. "This better be good, Lieutenant." James shared everything they had discovered, while Maria presented their sensor data and Tom described his encounter with the Gray. When they finished, the room fell silent. "You expect me to believe a ghost ship that appears and disappears at will is abducting our colonies?" Walker's voice dripped with doubt. "The evidence is clear, sir," James insisted, "and it's heading toward Earth." Walker exchanged glances with a woman sitting quietly at the end of the table. She nodded slightly. "This is General Kate Adams, head of Earth Defense," Walker introduced her reluctantly. General Adams studied them for a moment. "What you've described matches something we've seen before." She pressed a button, and the room darkened. A holographic display appeared in the center of the table, showing technical blueprints for a massive ship unlike any James had seen before. "Project Phantom," she said, "designed 50 years ago as the ultimate stealth warship. It was meant to use experimental phase-shifting technology to move between dimensions, making it effectively invisible to conventional sensors." Maria leaned forward, studying the design. "This is exactly what we saw." "Impossible," General Adams replied. "Project Phantom was abandoned after multiple test failures caused devastating accidents. The technology was deemed too dangerous. All blueprints were destroyed." "Then how do you explain what we saw?" James asked. General Adams frowned. "I can't. That's why I need to show you something few people have ever seen." They followed General Adams to a secure archive deep beneath the lunar base. Inside, she pulled up classified records of Project Phantom. "The official story is that the project was abandoned," she explained. "The truth is more complicated. The files showed that after the public cancellation, a small team continued working on the project in secret. The lead scientist was Professor Alan Morgan, a brilliant physicist who believed the technology could revolutionize space travel. What happened to him? Maria asked. Official records say he died in a lab accident 10 years ago, General Adams replied. But there are inconsistencies in the reports. Maria spotted something in the data. These records have been altered. Look at the digital signatures. They don't match the timestamps. James studied the professor's profile. If Morgan is still alive, he might know what we're dealing with. General Adams nodded. Find him. I'll authorize whatever resources you need. It took Maria 3 days to trace Professor Morgan's trail. The path led to a small research station orbiting Jupiter, officially listed as an automated weather monitoring facility. When their ship docked, they found the station was anything but automated. Inside, an old man with wild white hair sat surrounded by complex equipment. He didn't seem surprised to see them. I wondered when someone would come, he said calmly. I've been tracking the Phantom's movements for months. You know about the ship? James asked. Professor Morgan smiled sadly. Of course I do. I built it. He led them to his lab, where screens displayed the same energy signatures Maria had detected. Project Phantom was my life's work, Morgan explained. The ability to shift partially between dimensions, to exist in 2 places at once. We were so close to success. What went wrong? Tom asked. Morgan's face darkened. Not what? Who? My research partner, Robert Bell. He believed the technology should be weaponized. I wanted to use it for exploration, scientific discovery. We disagreed. So what happened? Maria pressed. I discovered Bell had secretly built a working prototype without the safety measures I designed. When I confronted him, he used the ship to escape. I faked my death to continue tracking him without interference. James leaned forward. But that was 10 years ago. Where has the ship been all this time? The phase technology has side effects, Morgan said. Time moves differently when you're shifting between dimensions. What might be years for us could be days for Bell. He's been perfecting the technology, making the ship larger, more powerful. And now he's taking people, Maria said. Why? Morgan sighed heavily. Bell always believed humanity was on the wrong path, too focused on expansion, not enough on advancement. He talked about resetting civilization, starting over with only the brightest minds. A sudden alarm blared through the station. On Morgan's screens, a massive energy signature appeared near Mars. He's coming, Morgan whispered. And he's closer than I thought. James activated his communicator. This is Lieutenant Reed to Earth Defense. The Phantom ship has been detected near Mars. It's of human origin, controlled by a scientist named Robert Bell. General Adams's voice came through the speaker. Are you certain, Lieutenant? Yes, James replied. And we need to evacuate Earth immediately. Bell plans to reset humanity. Impossible, Adams replied. We can't evacuate an entire planet. Then we need to stop him, James said. Morgan looked up, his eyes suddenly clear and determined. There might be a way. I designed a countermeasure, a way to force the Phantom back into normal space where conventional weapons could damage it. Can you build it? Maria asked. Morgan shook his head. Not here, but the blueprint exists in a secure facility on Europa. If we can reach it. Another alarm sounded. The screen showed the Phantom ship changing course, heading straight for their small station. He knows I'm here, Morgan said, fear in his voice. He's coming for me. James made a quick decision. Prepare for emergency departure. We're going to Europa. As they rushed to their ship, Morgan grabbed Maria's arm. There's something else you should know. Bell isn't working alone. He has allies, powerful people who share his vision for a better humanity. Who? Maria asked. Before Morgan could answer, the station shook violently. Through the viewport, they caught a glimpse of the massive warship materializing nearby. Parts of it seemed to fade in and out of existence, making it hard to look at directly. "No time," James shouted. "We need to go now." They barely made it to their ship before the station began to break apart. As they pulled away, Maria looked back to see the phantom ship hovering where the station had been. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a face watching from one of its windows, a human face filled with cold determination. Their ship raced toward Europa, carrying the only people who knew the truth. The ghost ship that had been terrorizing human space wasn't alien at all. It was human technology, created by humans, controlled by humans, and now threatening all of humanity. The race to save Earth had begun. The ice of Europa gleamed like polished glass as their ship approached. Below the frozen surface lay an ocean, and hidden within it, humanity's most secret research facility. "Authorization code accepted," a computerized voice announced as they descended toward what looked like empty ice. "Welcome to Deep Station." The ice seemed to split open, revealing a hangar bay carved into the moon's surface. Their ship landed smoothly inside before the ice closed again above them. Director Emma Blake met them at the airlock. She was tall with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Professor Morgan," she said with a slight nod. "We thought you were dead." "That was the idea," Morgan replied. Director Blake turned to the others. "Lieutenant Reed, Dr. Torres, Mr. Wilson, welcome to humanity's most classified research division. Few know we exist." She led them through corridors built of metal and transparent aluminum, offering glimpses of the dark ocean beyond. Scientists worked at stations filled with technology James had never seen before. "For 50 years, we've developed countermeasures for every possible threat to Earth," Blake explained, "including threats of our own making." They entered a massive chamber where a strange ship hung suspended in a cradle of blue energy. It was smaller than Bell's Phantom ship, but clearly built on similar principles. Parts of it seemed to fade from view when looked at directly. "Project Echo," Blake said. "Our answer to the Phantom, should it ever return." Morgan approached the ship, his hand reaching out but stopping short of touching it. "You actually built it, using my revised designs." Blake nodded. "We've been working on it since Bell disappeared with the original. But we've never successfully tested it. The neural interface is too complex for normal pilots." "Neural interface?" James asked. "The phase technology requires split-second adjustments that human reflexes can't handle," Blake explained. "So we designed a direct brain-to-ship connection, but the mental strain is too much for most people." She touched a control panel, and a door opened on the far side of the chamber. A man stepped through, wearing a simple uniform with the Echo Project insignia. He had a strong resemblance to someone James had seen before. "This is Captain Thomas Gray," Blake introduced him. "Our only surviving test pilot with neural implants compatible with the ship." Maria looked closely at the captain. "You look familiar." Gray smiled without humor. "I should. You saw my twin brother watching you from the Phantom." The room fell silent. "Your brother is working with Bell?" James asked. Gray nodded. "Jack and I were both test pilots for the original project. The first implants were crude. They left Jack changed. When Bell stole the prototype, Jack went with him." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Morgan demanded. "Because I was ordered not to," Gray replied, glancing at Blake. "And because I hoped I could reach him, bring him back." Blake moved to a large display showing Earth and the approaching Phantom ship. "We're out of time for family reunions. The Phantom will reach Earth in less than 48 hours. Our sensors show it's carrying enough phase shift energy to tear apart our atmosphere." "Can Echo stop it?" James asked. "In theory," Morgan said, "but it would need to get close enough to deploy a phase lock, a field that forces both ships into normal space." "Which is suicide," Gray added. "Bell would detect us instantly and attack." Maria had been examining the ship's specifications on a nearby terminal. She looked up suddenly. "Not if we modify Echo's energy signature to mimic the Phantom's. I could reprogram the emitters to create a false reading." Morgan considered this. It might work. For a few minutes. Enough time to hit close. I'll pilot, Gray said firmly. Blake nodded. Begin preparations immediately. Dr. Torres, work with Professor Morgan on the modifications. I'm going to, James announced. Gray shook his head. This is a one-person mission, Lieutenant. Not anymore, James replied. You'll need someone to deploy the phase lock while you fly, and I've seen the Phantom up close. Blake looked between them, then nodded. Make it happen. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Maria and Morgan worked non-stop on the modifications while technicians prepared Echo for launch. Through it all, Earth Defense Forces scrambled to prepare for the worst. In a quiet moment before the mission, James found Tom standing at a viewport, staring at the distant blue dot that was Earth. I should be going with you, Tom said without turning. Someone needs to stay behind, James replied. To tell our story if we fail. Tom turned to face him. The people from my colony. Do you think they're still alive? I don't know, James answered honestly. But if they are, we're going to find them. 6 hours before the Phantom would reach Earth, Echo was ready. James stood with Gray in the pilot chamber, both wearing neural interface suits. Once we're linked to the ship, communication will be limited, Gray explained. We'll feel each other's intentions more than hear words. Maria approached James before he entered the ship. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. The modification should hold for about 10 minutes, she told him. After that, Belle will know you're there. 10 minutes is all we need, James said with more confidence than he felt. Maria hesitated, then quickly hugged him. Come back, Lieutenant. James smiled. That's an order I can follow, Doctor. Inside Echo, James and Gray took their positions. Technicians connected the neural interfaces to their spines. James felt a strange tingling as his mind linked to the ship. Neural sync complete, a voice announced. Phase systems online. Through the viewport, James saw Blake, Maria, Tom, and Morgan watching as the hangar doors opened above. Then Gray engaged the engines, and Echo shot upward, breaking through Europa's thin atmosphere into open space. Setting course for intercept, Gray said, his voice strained as he controlled the complex ship. James looked at the tactical display, showing the Phantom approaching Earth. In 30 minutes, they would intercept it. Remember, Gray said quietly, my brother and Belle believe they're saving humanity. They think they're the heroes. James checked the phase lock device by kidnapping innocent people and threatening to destroy Earth. I didn't say they were right, Gray replied, just that they believe it. Echo accelerated to full speed, its engines pulsing with strange blue-white energy. As they pushed closer to light speed, parts of the ship began to shift between dimensions. Through the viewport, space itself seemed to bend. Phase shift active, Gray announced. We're now partially out of normal space. James looked at his hands, which seemed solid one moment, and transparent the next. So this is what it feels like to be a ghost. Ahead, a massive shape began to take form against the blackness of space. The Phantom, finally visible as they entered the same dimensional state. Intercept in 5 minutes, Gray said. Belle hasn't detected us yet. James prepared the phase lock. Let's make this count. They approached the massive warship that shouldn't exist, but very much did. The fate of Earth hung in the balance as Echo closed the gap. 2 humans in a stolen technology against a madman with a plan to reshape humanity forever. Echo approached the massive Phantom ship silently, hidden in the same dimensional state. Up close, the Phantom was even more impressive and terrifying. Its hull stretched for kilometers, shifting and changing like something from a nightmare. 2 minutes until we're in range, Gray said, his voice strained from the mental effort of piloting Echo. James checked the phase lock device one final time. Once we deploy this, both ships will be forced into normal space for about 3 minutes. Earth's defense fleet will fire everything they have at the Phantom during that window. And at us, Gray added grimly. We'll be caught in the crossfire. If we survive the initial hit from the phase lock, James replied. The energy discharge could tear Echo apart. Gray smiled slightly. Always the optimist, Lieutenant. Through their neural link to Echo, James felt the ship's systems pulse with energy. The viewport showed the Phantom growing larger as they closed in. They were now close enough to see details of its construction. Technology far beyond what humanity was supposed to have. 30 seconds, Gray whispered. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout Echo. On the display, the Phantom's energy signature spiked dramatically. They've detected us, Gray shouted, yanking the controls to evade. Echo shuddered as energy beams from the Phantom sliced through the space they had just occupied. The larger ship turned with impossible speed, bringing more weapons to bear. Our camouflage failed, James said, checking the systems. Maria's modifications couldn't hold. New plan, Gray said, his eyes narrowed in concentration. I'll get us close enough for you to board the Phantom. Board it. James stared at him. That's suicide. The phase lock needs to be deployed from inside their engine room for maximum effect, Gray explained as he maneuvered Echo through another barrage of energy beams. I'll create a diversion. Before James could argue, Gray sent Echo into a steep dive, accelerating toward the Phantom's underside. The smaller ship's engines screamed with the strain as they narrowly avoided the larger ship's weapons. There, Gray pointed to a maintenance airlock on the Phantom's hull. I can get you close enough to jump across while we're both phased. Your suit will protect you for about 5 minutes in dimensional flux. James secured the phase lock device to his suit. What about you? I'll keep them busy, Gray replied. His face was pale with strain, but his eyes were determined. Find my brother if you can. Echo rocketed toward the Phantom's hull, dodging energy beams that tore through space around them. When they were just meters from the airlock, Gray nodded to James. Now, James hit the emergency hatch release. Space bent around him as he leaped from Echo toward the Phantom. For a terrifying moment, he floated in the void between ships, his body flickering between dimensions. Then his magnetic boots connected with the Phantom's hull. I'm in position, he reported through his comm. Good luck, Gray's voice came back, already fading as Echo pulled away. Make it count. James used an override code Morgan had given him to access the airlock. Inside, the Phantom was eerily quiet. The corridors stretched in impossible angles, sometimes seeming to loop back on themselves, a side effect of the phase technology. He consulted the schematic on his wrist display. The engine room was 20 levels down, at the core of the ship. As he moved through the corridors, he saw no crew, no signs of life. Where is everyone? He whispered to himself. The answer came as he passed a large chamber. Through a viewport, he saw rows of stasis pods, hundreds of them, each containing a person. In the center of the room, monitoring equipment showed vital signs. The colonists, James realized, they weren't dead. They were being kept in stasis. He wanted to stop and free them, but time was running out. Earth was minutes away from destruction. He continued toward the engine core. Outside, the battle raged. Through occasional viewports, James could see Echo dancing between the Phantom's energy beams, drawing fire away from Earth's defense fleet, which had moved into position but couldn't target the partially phased Phantom. Finally, James reached the engine room, a massive chamber dominated by a pulsing core of blue-white energy. The phase drive was unlike anything he had ever seen, twisting reality around it. As he moved to plant the phase lock device, a voice stopped him. I wouldn't do that if I were you. James turned to see a man who looked like an older version of Gray, but with cold, empty eyes. Beside him stood another man, tall, thin, with the calculating gaze of a scientist. Jack Gray, James said to the first man. And you must be Robert Bell. Bell smiled. You've come a long way to die, Lieutenant Reed. Why are you doing this? James demanded, stalling for time as he inched closer to the engine core. Because humanity is killing itself with mediocrity, Bell replied, expanding without evolving. I'm saving our best minds before the collapse, by kidnapping innocent people and threatening to destroy Earth. Those people are not innocent, Bell's voice hardened. They're complicit in a system that values consumption over advancement. The phase shift I'm about to trigger will reset Earth's atmosphere, make it uninhabitable for a century. When we return, we'll rebuild properly. You're insane, James said. Jack Gray stepped forward. Enough talk. Kill him. Bell raised a weapon, but before he could fire, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared throughout the Phantom. What's happening? Bell demanded, turning to a console. Your brother is happening, James said, recognizing the energy signature on Bell's display. He's ramming Echo into your primary stabilizers. Outside, Echo had driven itself directly into the Phantom's weakest point. The smaller ship's engines overloaded, creating a cascade of energy that tore through the Phantom's shields. In the moment of confusion, James lunged forward and attached the phase lock device to the engine core. He activated it immediately. No, Bell screamed, lunging for the device. A blinding flash of energy erupted from the core. James felt reality solidify around him as both ships were forced fully into normal space. The Phantom's systems screamed as they tried to compensate for the sudden shift. Jack Gray was thrown across the room by the energy pulse. Bell remained standing, his face contorted with rage. You've doomed us all, he shouted over the alarms. James checked his wrist display. The Earth Defense Fleet had opened fire, their weapons now able to hit the fully materialized Phantom. The ship shuddered with each impact. It's over, Bell, James said. Bell smiled suddenly, the expression chilling. Not yet. The drive is still active. When it overloads, it will tear a hole between dimensions large enough to swallow Earth's entire solar system. He turned to a terminal and began entering commands. James rushed forward to stop him, but Jack Gray recovered and blocked his path. Your brother is dead because of you, James told him. Something flickered in Jack's eyes. Doubt, perhaps even guilt. In that moment of hesitation, James pushed past him toward Bell. The scientist was seconds away from completing the sequence that would overload the drive. James tackled him away from the console, but the damage was done. The engine core began to pulse with increasing intensity. 2 minutes to catastrophic failure, an automated voice announced. Bell laughed. You can't stop it now. James looked at the engine core, then at his neural interface suit. An idea formed, desperate and likely suicidal, but possibly their only chance. He connected his suit's neural link directly to the Phantom's control systems. Pain shot through his body as the ship's vast systems flooded his mind. What are you doing? Bell demanded, suddenly alarmed. Creating a dimensional trap, James gasped through the pain. Around the engine core, containing the explosion. With the last of his strength, James redirected the phase energy inward, creating a bubble of distorted space-time around the engine room. The walls began to warp and bend as reality itself folded inward. Get to an escape pod, James told Jack. Tell them what happened here. Jack hesitated, then nodded once before running from the engine room. Bell tried to follow, but the doorway sealed as the dimensional trap strengthened. You'll die too, Bell said, his confidence finally breaking. James smiled through the pain. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just be somewhere else for a while. The engine core reached critical levels. As the explosion began, James completed the dimensional trap. The engine room, with James, Bell, and the overloading core, vanished from normal space, pulled into a pocket dimension created by the very technology Bell had hoped would destroy Earth. In normal space, the Phantom shuddered, then went dark. The colonists in stasis remained safe as Earth's fleet moved in to secure the ship. The Phantom warship that shouldn't exist had finally been seen by all, and stopped. 3 months later, Maria Torres stood alone in her lab on the lunar base. On her screen, a faint signal pulsed, a transmission unlike any other, originating from somewhere between dimensions. The message was simple: still here, found a way back. Wait for me. Maria smiled and began to prepare for the return of a man who had saved Earth in a battle that most people would never truly see or understand. The war against the impossible had been won. For now.